one of the things I love most about working on 112BK is that so many of my colleagues are young women of color. Some of them immigrants, some of them queer, all of them able to take Milo Yiannopoulos in a fight. Their viewpoints, along with the viewpoints of the men who work on the show who also represent diverse backgrounds and identities, permeate 112BK like a spicy, woke dry rub, informing the types of stories we cover and the guests we book. Today, I'd like to introduce you to a few of these women in a new segment. It's like The View, except Abby Huntsman can't sit with us. Myra Al-Rahim, Shirin Barghi, and Isabel Alcantara. Let's take it away. Thanks for joining us, you guys.
Thanks for having us.
That was awkward because we're going back and forth on the title of what this segment is. I think the crew is good because, like, you guys are
actually the crew.
But also the spew was in there. It's like we're spewing.
Hello.
I would love to hear your thoughts on the current Joe Biden situation. How are we feeling about it?
Not great. No.
Tell us your thoughts.
Joe Biden should just peacefully rescind into the background and just say, people like me because I stood next to Obama a lot. And that's it.
I mean, what's surprising to me is that there's any surprise around it. Like, we've known that he puts his hands on women's shoulders for far too long, for like years now. It's always sort of been like an inside joke, right?
Also, how many men has he done that to?
Right.
No, none.
Right. But I guess that's something that people say is that, like, oh, it's not just women. He does it to men. It's like part of like, who he is.
Like, does he smell men's hair?
Yeah, where's the picture of him?
Depends on if they're using like Pert Plus or something that smells really good.
Where's the picture of him holding Obama's shoulders and kissing the top of his head?
I mean,
Like, where is that?
I mean,
I think he is like a physically affectionate guy. That's sort of his like shtick. But it just it gets more and more comical, right? Where it's like one woman's like, oh, he touched my shoulder. Another woman's like, oh, he nuzzled my neck. Somebody else is like, he went in to nuzzle noses. Like,
like bunny kiss.
Who does that?
Like, no, not a statesman.
I don't even necessarily like when members of my own family do that to me. I mean, it's just like it's just kind of weird all around. I mean, I think another thing is he's been so god awful at apologizing for what he's done. I mean, it's never really. I mean, he's kind of sort of insisted that he didn't intend for anything inappropriate to happen, but like hasn't ever stopped to consider like how he might have made these women feel at any point. I mean,
his intentions do matter, but also he has not really spoken out and apologized in the correct way and done a mea culpa. I mean, I also feel like, I don't know, what do we think about how does this signal the demise of his political career?
Absolutely not. I don't think it does at all. I think if he were to run, he is pretty much guaranteed around 20 to 25% of the base. And we can't write him off too soon. I mean, this is something that's unfortunate. Isabel, I don't disagree with you necessarily. I don't feel like he should run. I think if he were to run now, which he definitely will, he's gonna spend his entire campaign apologizing. And it's going to be awful and it's going to be embarrassing and we're all gonna be very mortified to have to vote for him when it comes down to it.
That's true. We will all check that box though.
Right.
Shirin, what do you think about, I feel like some men and some women are saying, whoa, like, can't we hug anymore? Like, this is so extreme. Like, what do you respond to that?
That's a good question. I think like so let me take it back to when I first read Lucy Flores's article in The Cut. Like it all made sense. And what I noticed mostly is that the response that she got about how she's like, as if she has some agenda for coming out with this article now, writing about this now.
I mean, that's quite a sword to fall on to clear the path for Bernie. Like this is like someone's reputation. Like you're going public, you're saying all of these things of a beloved political figure. Like you don't just do that because you're like, really pulling for your candidate.
So what if she is? Like, so what if she's like, there's somebody else who is more fit to serve in the highest office in the land? Like, to me, that makes a fine case.
Well, I think like right now with this whole Me Too movement and the way it's like become this huge like gray area thing, and a lot of things I feel like are getting lumped into that, even though Lucy Flores herself says that, like she doesn't feel like what happened to her amounts to assault. Sexual.
Yeah, she was very measured. She's like, it made me feel uncomfortable.
Exactly. But I feel like somehow it's still like it's getting a little bit like Me Too-y, and I feel like it's using a lot of that language. It made me think a lot about the language of this whole movement, about how it needs to change. And like I feel like there's something, and when I say that the language that we use as women to describe these events needs to change, I mean that like calling it creepy or gross, versus like unacceptable, it was out of line. I feel like being more definitive in describing things, because calling something like creepy or gross or like yucky, it just like it doesn't say much.
But I guess
ambiguous.
You think it's ambiguous? I don't necessarily.
I think it's very
I
ambiguous.
think it evokes a feeling.
Yeah, it's
and
very
I think,
personal because
like every woman has felt ambiguously gross about something.
Yeah.
And may not be able to say whether or not it crossed a line. Like, I don't know that Joe Biden leaving his hand on somebody's shoulders for 10 seconds crosses a line, but it could make someone feel creepy. And so I do sort of feel like the I statements that we're trained to use of like, I felt like that made me feel like you were a creepy old man.
Yeah.
It's like different from being
Yeah.
like that is unacceptable behavior in all cases.
Or I feel like it was unacceptable what happened to me, I feel.
Right.
Which is something that I feel like didn't really happen with this. And it's like you hear a lot, you know, and, people coming out, like using moments that they were uncomfortable, and then how it gets lumped into something that was like bigger than that, you know?
I mean, Myra, what do you think about, in race, we talk about like microaggressions a lot, about how somebody can be, not overtly racist, but that there are microaggressions that over a lifetime chip away at somebody's like sense of self, right? Do you consider this to be like the gender version of microaggressions?
Oh, God, that's such a good question. I think, if anything, it is a testament to how out of step Biden is with everything that's been going on in terms of politics and in the area of Me Too. Do I consider what he did a microaggression? I mean, certainly by today's standards, but I think something that he's dealing with is like he doesn't know how to be in this time. He's been a politician, a career politician for many years in his life now. This is the way he's dealt with women for forever. And this is the first time people are actually coming out and being in a serious way. I recognize those pictures have been out for a long time, those creepy pictures, for lack of a better word to use. But just to say that I just don't know what it's not. I don't feel any sympathy for him, but I imagine that he must feel confounded.
At the end of the day, this is like a white man, who society has, I guess, for all his political career has given him like passes to act this way, and he himself might think that it's not appropriate. And I feel like America hasn't helped by calling him like Uncle Joe.
But think about what it means when we call him Uncle Joe too, because like we all have the uncle.
Right? Yeah. The uncle archetype.
Right.
That's serious.
And I do want to acknowledge that some people have come out and been like, I didn't feel uncomfortable when he touched me, which is like fine and valid, but that doesn't mean that all women didn't feel uncomfortable, right?
Yeah. This chorus of these surrogate women who have just come out, like Meghan McCain, and people who had worked on the Clinton campaign. It's all just kind of ridiculous, and I feel like I can't believe we haven't gone to the point where we realize like, okay, just because some people didn't feel creepy doesn't delegitimize the experience of women who came out and felt like violated by his actions. I wish we could just get past that point. People, the same thing can happen to two people, and two people can have different outcomes, but that doesn't mean you can like then disrespect like the other person.
I mean, it's like in yoga. Some people like the teacher coming over and making adjustments, and some people take the white stone and they place it on their yoga mat and they're like, please don't touch me. If we can do this for yoga, why can't we do this for the rest of society?
I mean,
All right, let's talk about something that's a little bit of a weird one. Jim Carrey is back in the spotlight. And he's in a Twitter spat with Mussolini's granddaughter over a cartoon. He's an artist now, right? So he drew a cartoon where Mussolini and his mistress are being strung up by their feet, and the caption was like, "This is what happens to fascist dictators." And Mussolini's granddaughter got pissed about it. What do you guys think about this?
It's kind of weird to come out in favor of the fascist dictator, no matter like who he is to you.
No, but
it's still weird. It's weird.
What's weird is that she's a politician for like the center-right party in Italy, Forza.
Yeah.
And I think that's unprecedented. That a descendant of Mussolini, not even his great-granddaughter, his granddaughter, like she's not even that far. She might have known the guy for God's sake.
She probably met him. Yeah.
She probably met him.
Yes.
And she's still in the game. I just can't believe
Italy.
it.
I mean, like Berlusconi is still in the
I
game.
know. It's a good point, MacKenzie. That's really fair.
But I mean, what do you think about that? Where it's like, okay, there's some family allegiance, I guess. Like, do you think that she's justified in saying like that's dehumanizing of my grandfather, even if he was a bad guy?
I don't think that's what she was trying to say. I think she was using that to say that, listen, America, you also have your own checkered past. So how about why Jim Carrey?
Should be noted, Jim Carrey is Canadian.
Oh, I know.
Which I think was pointed out.
I didn't know Jim Carrey was Canadian.
I found out when I was looking
legitimately
into the story.
shocked right now.
I was floored.
This changes my whole childhood.
I know.
Game.
That's right.
Game change.
You see, this is the problem with the story. I don't really know who to get behind because I don't really feel particularly sympathetic toward Jim Carrey, and I definitely don't feel sympathetic toward Mussolini's granddaughter. And like, I just don't know where I really stand in this whole issue.
It's just like a Twitter cesspool.
This is Twitter's lifeblood.
Yeah.
This is how it sustains itself.
Jim Carrey getting into a fight with Mussolini's granddaughter is the most most 2019 bullshit I've ever heard. And it's just going to get worse.
Did you see her tweets? They were so weird. They were like someone said like, oh, your piggish grandfather. And she was like, well, what about your piggy family? And it was just like so bizarre. It was like, what is
like
this?
part English as a second language, perhaps, and part like I'm just learning how to use Twitter. I want to shift focus again because we're preparing for this segment on Weed Church is what it's called on the board.
Church of Weed.
Church of Weed. Yeah. And Shirin, maybe you can just give us like a brief background on what the story is.
So the Emmanuel Baptist Church in Clinton Hill, Brooklyn, became the first church to host a conference on marijuana and the industry and the business and how it's excluding people of color mostly. And so we'll be having the executive director of Women Grow, which is like this amazing organization that strives to promote and encourage women in the weed business. And also the pastor, the senior pastor, Reverend Trufant.
We've sort of been tickled by this idea of like, well, like weed in churches. Yeah. And then that led to this discussion about like, well, what about drug use in other religions, which is actually not that kooky, including ayahuasca. Have any of you guys done ayahuasca?
No.
Are you allowed, maybe you're not allowed to say it on camera, but you can like wink or something. But I do know a lot of people who are interested, who are sort of like white, like spiritual seekers. And I'm curious about your guys' thoughts. Isabel, like, do you have any thoughts about sort of like a secular white appropriation of something that is actually part of a religious and cultural experience for indigenous people?
Yeah, well, I mean, like saging. Sage has just become like white girl Febreze at this point. It's so sad.
When I had my last housewarming party,
Did you get saged?
So many people brought me sage. Thank you to all my friends who brought me housewarming present gifts, but I have so much sage, I don't know what to do with it.
Too much sage. Yeah. Cooking.
Yeah, so what about, do you think that one should be able to sage if you are not a member of an indigenous community?
I think it's like anything. It's like you have to consider all of the factors. The fact that like, do people do this? When they do it, is it a really like sacred ceremony? Do they like? Does it mean a lot to a lot of people? And that's sort of the reflection you have to have during these things. Like there's so many white guys that go to Oaxaca to do peyote. Right? And then there's a whole group of people who are like, peyote is this ritual we do because it informs our artistry and our culture and all of these things. And when you do it because you just want to like get high and like hallucinate, it like devalues that culture. It says, well, everything's just consumable for the experience. Nothing matters.
Yeah, it's like tourism.
Everything's on fire.
It's like, I remember, not tangentially related, but I remember a few years ago, some of my white friends were wearing the hijab, and it was like hijabi for the day. Now we know what it's like to be a Muslim woman.
Yeah.
And you know,
wow, it just takes one day. That's amazing.
Right? And it's like almost like, and you know, like in the community, people start calling it hijab tourism. You know, and it's
my friend calls it convertible hijabs.
Yeah,
right.
Convertible
top on,
hijabs,
top off.
That's crazy that they have a name for that. So it is kind of like a question of cultural appropriation to some degree,
absolutely,
right? I mean, it's really what's going on.
And I think like cultural appropriation happens all the time and is sort of like a legacy of us living in a melting pot. But I guess the question is like, in which contexts is it acceptable, and how do you do it in a way that doesn't feel squicky? If you just like the smell of sage in your house, like I just wish that there was an added dimension of, are we also talking about like the Dakota Access Pipeline, or you know, like if you're gonna cherry pick the parts of a culture that you think are rad, maybe you should also do a little bit of research into ways in which they are oppressed.
Or maybe you just like the smell of sage, and that's cool, but like don't pretend that it's anything more. There's no like wellness cleansing. You're just kind of like, I just like the smell of the way Palo Santo burns.
Right.
No, but you see, Palo Santo is kind of a contentious one, and this is something I found out only recently, much to my dismay, because I've
Educate us, Myra.
Well, I was
Palo
using
Santo
it pretty
smells
seriously.
delicious.
It smells amazing, and it tastes great in ice cream. Has anyone had Palo Santo ice cream here?
No,
it's
I haven't
amazing.
had.
That's bougie.
Where can we get Palo Santo?
But there is like it's contentious because. Man, I really wish I had more facts on my side for this, but I know that it's coming from a tree that is like endangered right now because like so much of it is being cut down and like to like mass sell it off to people like us, I guess, who want to like use it in our apartments. But actually, it has an important role in certain indigenous communities and rituals and practices, right? But they're actually running out of it. And
God, it's like
there's
mezcal.
quinoa.
I know.
Yeah.
Wait, what about mezcal? What do you mean? Are we running out of mezcal?
Mezcal, the agave plant takes a long time to grow,
Wow.
and you get a very little amount of mezcal per harvest. And so now that mezcal is exploding in popularity, there are sustainable ways to grow it and less sustainable ways to grow it. So there is some concern about managing agave populations in Mexico.
So I imagine it's a similar thing with the Palo Santo situation.
So.
I'm sure.
You guys, thank you so much for joining us for
Yay.
this first episode of The Crew.
The crew.
I don't know.
Crew.
We're going to workshop
The crew
it.
works.
It's cute. It's cute.
Thanks for being here, you guys.
Thanks,
Thanks for having us.
MacKenzie.
Yay.